When it comes to Nokia phones in the US, your top choices at the moment are the Nokia Lumia 920 available at AT&T and the Lumia 928 available for Verizon Wireless. But if you had to choose either one without concern for carrier, which would you pick? It's hard to separate the devices because they're so similar in terms of performance and hardware as well. They both have 1.5 gigahertz dual core processors, a gig of RAM, 32 gigabytes of memory, no micro SD card, NFC, Q wireless charging, and a 2000 milliamp battery. So they're pretty much identical on the inside. Internally, it's a bit of a mirror match because you kind of know what to expect when it comes to Windows Phone 8. You get similar setups for customizing the home screen, you get similar applications like Microsoft Office, of course. Then you've got games, and on Nokia's part, they have their Here applications for mapping software. So on the software front, they're pretty much the same. Neither carrier really goes out of control with preloaded software. Obviously, you're going to get a little more on AT&T, but it can be removed. There are really only three areas that truly distinguish the 928 from the 920. That's the hardware design, the camera, and of course the display. Now, even though these are both 4.5-inch displays, there are some noticeable differences between the two. They both have 720p resolutions, but the 928 has an OLED screen. Basically what that means is that it's a different type of display from the IPS display used in the 920. On OLED, the colors have more saturation. It's kind of like there's more oomph to them. It's like a little more vibrant. So you see there's a little more diversity in the blues right here on the right hand side. There's a little more diversity in the greens. Like it's hard to see on screen, but when you see them in person, you'll definitely notice that the colors on the 928 jump out at you a little bit more. But that can be a little bit deceiving. Even though the colors don't quite jump out at you on the 920 as they do on the competition, I think the 920 is actually a better display because when I look at the emerald on this screen, the green, it's a little bit more true to life. The green on the OLED is a little bit more pronounced. Looks like there's a little bit more mixed in. It might not come up on the video, but when you look at it in person, you definitely notice that this is a different type of green going on. And aside from that, the white is definitely noticeable. On the 920, which has an IPS display, the white actually looks like white, while on the 928, it's a little bit more of a tint to it. Also, when you browse the web a lot, having a white background on IPS is better than on OLED because OLED tends to use up more energy. So you're better off having this in terms of color profile and battery to go with the 920. Not as flashy, but it still does a better overall job. Now let's compare hardware. On the 920, it kind of tries to stand out a little more. It uses bright colors. This is cyan. You can also get it in red, orange, or you can keep it simple with black. The edges on it are curved and rounded. So you see it kind of slopes in, so it just fits nicely in your palm and you just curl around it. The 928 on the other hand is a little bit more rigid and a little more business-like. The edges are flat and straight on the sides. It does curve in the back, but that's pretty much it. And when you put it in your palm, the tips kind of dig into you a tiny little bit. It's a small annoyance, but it is an annoyance nonetheless. In terms of the color options, it's pretty much just white and it's glossy. The 920 also has glossy, but this particular model, depending on the color you choose, it's just a matte finish and it's nicer to hold polycarbonate. You notice that the speaker is visible on the back of the 928, so if you lay it flat, it doesn't sound as good. And the overall quality is not as good as it is on the 920, which has dual speakers on the bottom. Now that's a negative because if you're holding the phone like this, you're kind of muffling it. But if you someone who curves your hand like this, it sounds a little better. And if you lay it flat on your desk, it has a nice sound to it as well. On the 928, you have your headphone jack, SIM slot, and your micro USB charging all in one place. While on the 920, you just have the headphone jack and the SIM slot, and then the charging is done at the bottom. Now, if you want to use the phone while it's charging, it's a little bit better to have the 920 because when the cord wraps at the top of the 928, depending on how you position it, it's not the most comfortable experience. Both phones have the standard Windows Phone 8 button setup. They also have similar front-facing cameras and 8.7 megapixel rear cameras. But you notice the setups are different. On the 920, you just have an LED flash. On the 928, you have a xenon and an LED flash. Now, the LED flash is for video to have a persistent light, but with xenon flash, it's designed to put more light in the total area and capture more of the background. So when you take a photo with flash in low light conditions, you're not just flooding your subject with a bunch of light at once. Now, the results aren't always the best because sometimes they can put a little too much tint on the skin tone of the person. So yes, you might capture more of the background, but the color might be a little bit off. So it's really a matter of preference, depending on which one you want. Be sure to click the link below so you can see the actual photos rather than just the previews that we've included in this video, so you can get a better sense of how the photos compare to each other. There aren't many cases where you'll find two phones that are so alike yet so different at the same time. The 920 and the 928 are pretty much identical, but there are some key differences between the two. And that's kind of sad because the 920 came out more than 6 months ago, so it's been out for a while. Yet I still think this might actually be the better option of the two. So if you're dead set on buying a Windows Phone 8 device and you haven't pulled the trigger on the 920 by now, you might end up waiting a little bit longer to find something else. But if you're on Verizon and you're loyal to Verizon, obviously the 928 is going to be the way that you're going to end up going. But irrespective of carrier, I think that the Lumia 920 is still the best Windows Phone 8 handset from Nokia that you can get in the US. This is Andrew from MobileBurn.com. Thanks for watching.